When a prison warden gave the order to inject a lethal dose into a convicted cop, he had no idea that outside those cold steel walls, a furious German shepherd was about to change everything. What started as a routine execution would soon spiral into a shocking chain of events, unraveling a deadly conspiracy and proving once again that you should never underestimate a dog's loyalty. The execution chamber was deathly silent, the only sound a faint buzzing from the overhead fluorescent lights. Ryan Carter lay strapped to the gurney, his wrists bound, his body still. His pulse hammered against his ribs, but his expression remained calm. He had spent months preparing for this moment, for the slow march toward an end he didn't deserve. His crime? Murdering a journalist who had been on the verge of exposing one of the biggest police corruption scandals in the city's history. Except he hadn't done it. The evidence had been too perfect, the trial too swift. Someone had wanted him buried, and now, in just a few minutes, their plan would finally be complete. Through the thick glass of the observation room, a handful of witnesses watched, their faces void of emotion. Warden Simmons gave a brief nod. The executioner reached for the first injection. Outside, thunder rumbled. A storm was rolling in, and then the barking started. First it was faint, distant, but within seconds, the noise grew, deep and relentless, echoing through the walls of the prison. The guards shifted uncomfortably, glancing at one another. Somewhere beyond those reinforced doors, a dog was losing its mind. Not just any dog. Shadow. Ryan's K-9 partner. His shadow. His protector. And tonight he refused to be silent. The German shepherd snarled, lunging against the grip of the officer holding his leash. The moment Ryan had been taken away, Shadow had sensed something was wrong. He had spent weeks pacing, refusing food, refusing comfort. And now, at the 11th hour, he could feel it in his bones. His handler was slipping away, and no one was stopping it. Ryan swallowed hard, his throat dry. He could almost picture Shadow out there, muscles tensed, ears pinned back, his sharp instincts screaming at him to act. Then the lights went out. For a split second, everything was swallowed in darkness. A loud boom rattled the walls. The emergency sirens shrieked to life. Red lights flickered, alarms blaring through the halls. Shouts rang out. The warden cursed. Guards scrambled. Ryan's breath caught. His fingers curled into fists. Something was happening. Something big. And as the chaos unfolded around him, only one thought ran through his mind. Shadow. The sirens wailed through the prison corridors, drowning out the shouts of officers scrambling to regain control. Ryan Carter's heartbeat pounded in his ears as he sprinted down the dimly lit hallway, his bare feet slamming against the cold concrete. His wrists were raw from where he had torn himself free, but there was no time to think about the pain. The execution had been halted, but it wouldn't last. He had minutes, maybe seconds, before they locked him back up for good. He couldn't let that happen. Not now. Not when he knew the truth. The prison had become a war zone. Guards rushed past him toward the control room, their boots echoing like gunfire. Somewhere, an officer barked orders into his radio. Ryan kept his head down, slipping between the shadows, his breath shallow, his pulse erratic. If he could just get to the east wing, he had a chance. The ventilation shaft above the kitchen, it was a long shot, but it was his shot. Outside, the rain hammered against the pavement, and through the chaos, a deep, commanding bark split the night. Shadow. Ryan skidded to a stop, his body frozen in place for a fraction of a second. He didn't need to see his dog to know exactly where he was. Shadow was close, fighting for him, looking for him. And if Shadow was here, that meant only one thing. Emily Grayson had done the impossible. Through the reinforced fences and towering prison walls, Shadow fought with everything he had, his powerful frame lunging forward, dragging a struggling officer across the wet asphalt. The handler tried to hold him back, but Shadow was relentless. His instincts had been screaming at him for weeks. His human was in danger. And now, on this stormy night, he was done waiting. Emily's car screeched to a stop just outside the prison gate, the headlights slicing through the rain. She shoved the door open and stepped into the storm, her soaked trench coat clinging to her frame as she flashed her badge at the nearest guard. Detective Grayson, Special Investigations. I have evidence proving Ryan Carter's innocence. You need to stop this execution immediately. The guards hesitated, glancing at one another. The confusion was evident. This wasn't part of the plan. Then, the warden's voice thundered over the prison intercom, his anger barely contained. Grayson, stand down. Carter is a convicted murderer. You are interfering with a state execution. Emily's fingers curled into fists, her pulse hammering against her ribs. She knew what this was. A cover-up. A desperate attempt to silence the truth. And she wasn't about to let them win. He was framed, she shouted, her voice cutting through the rain. And you know it. Holloway is behind this. And I have the proof. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, the weight of her words settled over the officers. Some of them shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting toward the guard tower, where Deputy Chief Marcus Holloway had been watching everything unfold. Holloway had spent years hiding behind his badge, pulling the strings of the justice system like a master puppeteer. But tonight, under the unforgiving glare of the security lights, his control was slipping. Inside the prison, Ryan could feel the shift, the hesitation, the uncertainty. Then, from down the corridor, footsteps, fast, determined, coming straight for him. He had no more time. Ryan took off again, his legs burning, his body screaming for rest. He shoved through a side door, finding himself in the kitchen. Metal counters gleamed under the flickering emergency lights. He jumped onto one of them, reaching for the ventilation shaft above. Then a gunshot rang out. The bullet slammed into the stainless steel just inches from his head. Ryan twisted, heart hammering, as Officer Green stepped out of the shadows, his pistol leveled at Ryan's chest. You really thought you'd get out of this? Green sneered, adjusting his grip. You were dead the moment Holloway picked you. Should have just laid down and taken it. Ryan didn't move. His breath was slow, controlled. His mind calculated every angle, every possible move. Green had the gun, but he had one advantage. He had nothing left to lose. Green took a step forward, finger tightening on the trigger. Then, from outside the prison walls, a low growl. It was guttural, primal, the sound of a predator locked onto its target. Ryan's chest tightened. Shadow. The moment shattered in an explosion of motion. The door behind Green burst open as a black and tan blur of muscle and fury launched forward. Shadow hit Green like a freight train. The officer barely had time to react before the dog's powerful jaws clamped down on his forearm, the gun flying from his grip. Green screamed, stumbling backward as Shadow drove him to the ground, his snarls echoing through the kitchen. Ryan didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, grabbed the fallen gun, and turned it on Green in one smooth motion. Call off the execution. Now. His voice was low, deadly. Green's face contorted in pain, his free hands scrambling against the floor. You think killing me is gonna fix this? He spat. You'll never stop Holloway. You'll never make it out of here alive. Ryan exhaled, his grip steady. Watch me. Then, from behind him, footsteps. Emily burst through the doorway, rain-soaked and breathless, her own gun raised. Her eyes flickered between Ryan and Green, taking in the chaos. Then she met Ryan's gaze. For the first time since the trial, he saw something different in her eyes. Not pity, not guilt, determination. She turned toward her radio, pressing a button. This is Detective Grayson. Ryan Carter is innocent. I have the proof. Stand down. The words sent a shockwave through the air. From the prison yard, Shadow lifted his head, ears flicking as the radio static buzzed through the speakers. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then, slowly, one by one, officers began lowering their weapons. Ryan felt the breath leave his lungs. It wasn't over. Not yet. But tonight, for the first time in months, he wasn't running toward death. He was running toward justice. Before I share what happens next, the final, shocking truth about the conspiracy that nearly got Ryan killed, I want to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your flag in the comments. And if you believe that loyalty like Shadow's is worth more than 1,000 words, hit that like button. Because in the next part, the real fight begins. The cold night air hit Ryan Carter like a sledgehammer as he sprinted through the open gates of the prison, rain hammering down in relentless sheets. His lungs burned, his body screamed for rest, but he didn't slow. Shadow ran beside him, his powerful legs pushing through the mud, his breath coming in sharp, focused bursts. Behind them, the alarms wailed into the storm, their shrill cries mixing with the distant shouts of officers scrambling to contain the chaos. Emily Grayson was close behind, her footsteps pounding the pavement, her coat soaked and clinging to her as she fought to keep up. They had done the impossible. Ryan Carter was out. But escaping the prison was only the beginning. A blinding flash of headlights cut through the darkness ahead, tires screeching against the wet road. For a split second, Ryan's muscles tensed, prepared for the worst. But then he recognized the car. Emily's. The one she had parked outside when she came demanding justice. She reached the door first, yanking it open and jumping inside, throwing herself into the driver's seat. "Move!" she yelled. Ryan barely had time to pull the back door open before Shadow leaped in, shaking rain from his thick coat. Ryan dove in right after him, slamming the door shut just as Emily floored the gas. The tires spun wildly before gripping, and then they were flying down the road, leaving behind the towering prison walls, the chaos, the life Ryan had been forced into. He pressed a hand to his ribs, his body aching from months of confinement, from the fight, from the sheer adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Emily's knuckles were white against the steering wheel, her jaw clenched. "We need a safe house," she muttered. "Somewhere to regroup before Holloway gets his men on us." Ryan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his damp hair. It won't take long. He already knew something was happening before the execution was stopped. He'll be mobilizing everyone he has. Emily's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. "We have at most an hour before every officer in the city is looking for you. Less if Holloway plays this smart." Ryan looked down at Shadow, who was sitting alert, his ears perked, his deep brown eyes locked onto him. The dog had risked everything tonight, had fought tooth and claw to reach him, and somehow Shadow had known that something wasn't right from the very beginning. Ryan took a steady breath and looked up at Emily. "We need to go to Cross's apartment." Emily's eyes snapped to him, disbelief flickering across her face. "Are you insane? That's the first place they'll expect us to go." "Exactly," Ryan said. "They'll think we wouldn't be that reckless. But there's something there, something we missed." Shadow found that bullet casing near the docks. It didn't match the crime scene. "If there's more, we need to find it before Holloway cleans it up." Emily hesitated, her grip on the wheel tightening. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, with a sharp curse under her breath, she took a sudden turn onto a dark side street, the city lights fading behind them as she pushed the car faster. The drive to Cross's old apartment was eerily quiet. The city was still alive, glowing under the streetlights, completely unaware that just an hour ago, an innocent man had almost been executed. When they reached the building, Emily killed the engine and they sat in silence, listening for any sounds of approaching sirens. Nothing. Yet, Ryan reached for the door handle, but Emily grabbed his arm. "We do this fast. We get in, grab what we need, and get out before anyone knows we were here." Ryan nodded. "Let's move." Shadow was the first out, hitting the pavement without hesitation, his nose already working. Ryan and Emily followed, keeping close to the shadows as they approached the entrance. The building was old, the brick worn from time, the metal staircase leading up to the third floor rusted but sturdy. Ryan climbed first, testing his weight on each step. His body still felt weak, slower than it should have been, but he pushed forward. When they reached the door, Emily knelt beside the handle, pulling out a small set of tools. "You picked up lock-picking in your spare time?" Ryan whispered. Emily shot him a look. "You work long enough in homicide, you learn a few things." The lock clicked open, and Ryan pushed the door inward. The air inside was stale, thick with dust and the lingering scent of old coffee and paper. Cross had been a journalist to his core. His apartment was a mess of notes, stacks of files, a corkboard covered in red string and pinned photographs. Ryan's stomach twisted. Cross had been so close to exposing Holloway. Close enough that they had needed a scapegoat. And Ryan had been the perfect target. Shadow moved first, his nose low to the ground, sniffing with purpose. Ryan followed him toward the desk, his fingers skimming the papers scattered across the surface. Cross's handwriting was scrawled across dozens of pages, notes detailing financial transactions, suspicious police promotions, evidence tampering. Then Ryan saw it. A name circled over and over. Luis Vega. Ryan's blood ran cold. Emily was already reading over his shoulder. Vega was one of Holloway's guys, a dirty cop who disappeared a few days before Cross was murdered. Ryan's jaw tightened. If Vega was about to flip on Holloway, that means Holloway got to him first. He was supposed to be the real informant. But when he disappeared, Cross had nothing left but speculation. Shadow suddenly let out a sharp bark. Ryan turned in time to see the dog standing near the closet, his body tense. Emily grabbed her gun, stepping forward cautiously. She placed a hand on the doorknob, gave Ryan a look, then yanked it open. Inside, tucked in the back corner, was a burned police uniform. Ryan felt his breath hitch. He reached for it, his fingers brushing against the scorched fabric. It was barely recognizable, but the remnants of the stitching on the chest were clear enough. Emily inhaled sharply. That's from a tactical unit. Someone inside the force. Ryan turned the fabric over, and there, on the inside lining, was a name written in black marker. M. Holloway. Silence filled the room. Ryan stared at the name, his fingers tightening around the charred uniform. He looked at Emily, his voice quiet but steady. This is it. Emily nodded, her expression grim. This is the proof. Then Shadow growled. Ryan's entire body went rigid. Outside, in the distance, the unmistakable sound of tires screeching against pavement filled the night air. The low hum of engines grew louder. Emily moved to the window, her breath catching. We've got company. Ryan stepped back, his mind racing. They had what they needed, but Holloway wasn't going to let them walk out of here alive. Outside, the headlights of multiple black SUVs flooded the alleyway below. And then, a gunshot shattered the silence. What would Holloway do to bury this evidence? Who had he sent to make sure Ryan never left that apartment? And with nowhere left to run, how would Ryan, Emily, and Shadow fight their way out? The first gunshot shattered the silence like glass, sending a bullet straight through the apartment window. Shards of glass exploded inward, catching the dim glow of the streetlights below as they rained onto the floor. Ryan reacted on instinct, grabbing Emily by the arm and yanking her down just as a second shot tore through the wall where she had been standing. Shadow let out a sharp growl, his body low, ears pinned back, eyes locked on the door. The dog could sense it, the hunters had arrived. Emily rolled onto her stomach, grabbing her gun as she crawled toward the desk. They're trying to pin us down, she hissed. We need another way out. Ryan's mind worked fast, scanning the apartment for options. The front door was a death trap. Holloway's men were likely already stacked in the stairwell. The window was out. That left. He turned toward the back room. Kitchen. Fire escape. Emily nodded, already moving. Ryan grabbed the burned police uniform from the closet, shoving it into his jacket before following her. Shadow moved with them, his paws silent against the wooden floor, his breaths quick but controlled. Another round of gunfire erupted as they darted into the kitchen. The fire escape loomed ahead, a rusted, shaky thing attached to the back of the building. Emily yanked open the window, but the second she did, a fresh hail of bullets clattered against the metal railing outside. Ryan cursed, ducking back. They've got both exits covered. Emily clenched her jaw, her mind racing. We need to split them up. Ryan nodded, already pulling his jacket off. He tossed it toward Shadow. Take him down first. They won't expect him to move solo. Shadow understood before the command was even given. The German shepherd snatched the jacket in his jaws and bolted back into the main room, darting low under the window line. Ryan counted in his head. 1, 2. Then, he heard it. Shadow crashing against the apartment door, snarling as he rammed his weight into it. The sound was enough to send the attackers outside into a frenzy. Gunfire erupted toward the front, momentarily drawing attention away from the back. That was their window. Ryan and Emily surged through the fire escape, metal creaking beneath their weight. They climbed down fast, skipping rungs, ignoring the sharp bite of rain against their skin. From below, a black SUV screeched into position near the alley. The second the tires skidded to a halt, 2 men in tactical gear leapt out, guns already raised. Emily fired first. The bullet hit the closest man in the thigh, dropping him instantly. Ryan took the second shot, striking the other assailant in the shoulder before he could react. The man spun, his weapon clattering to the pavement. They hit the ground running. The city blurred around them as they sprinted through the narrow alley, weaving between dumpsters and abandoned crates. The echoes of sirens howled in the distance, and behind them, more boots pounded against the pavement. Holloway's men giving chase. Ryan turned sharply at the next intersection, leading them through an older district of the city. They needed a car, an escape route, anything. Then he spotted it. A parked delivery truck, engine running, a driver stepping out to make a late-night drop. Ryan didn't hesitate. He closed the distance in 3 strides, grabbing the stunned driver by the shoulder and flashing his badge. "Police, I need your vehicle." The man barely had time to protest before Ryan was in the driver's seat, Emily scrambling in beside him. Shadow leaped in last, barely making it before Ryan hit the gas. The truck lurched forward, tires screeching against the wet asphalt. A glance in the mirror confirmed what he already knew. Holloway's SUVs were right behind them. Emily reloaded her weapon. "They're not backing off." Ryan's grip tightened on the wheel. "They won't. Not until we're dead." The chase tore through the streets, headlights slicing through the rain, the city a blur of neon and darkness. Holloway's men pushed hard, their vehicles closing the gap with every turn. One SUV swerved, trying to cut them off, but Ryan spun the wheel at the last second, sideswiping a parked car and forcing the pursuing vehicle into a skid. It wasn't enough. More were coming. Emily unbuckled her seatbelt, shifting onto her knees. "Keep it steady." Ryan barely had time to react before she shoved open the passenger door, half her body hanging into the storm. She aimed, fired. The first shot shattered the windshield of the lead SUV. The second hit the driver's shoulder. The vehicle jerked wildly before crashing into a traffic barrier, flipping onto its side. But the others didn't slow. Shadow growled from the back seat, his body tense. Then, up ahead, Ryan saw it, a bridge, the river below. He made a split-second decision. "Hold on." He slammed the brakes. The truck skidded sideways, fishtailing across the slick pavement. The first pursuing SUV was going too fast to react. Clipped the back of their vehicle, lost control, and spun straight through the guardrail. The metal gave way with a screeching groan, and the SUV plunged into the dark waters below. The second vehicle came to an abrupt stop, its driver hesitating. That was all the time Ryan needed. He threw the truck into reverse, slamming into the second SUV with bone-jarring force. The impact sent Holloway's men scrambling. Ryan didn't wait. He hit the gas again, weaving into the nearest intersection before cutting the lights and disappearing into the maze of abandoned warehouses near the docks. Only when they were deep into the industrial district did he finally stop. The truck's engine rumbled, hot from the abuse. Emily exhaled, wiping rain from her face, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Ryan glanced at Shadow, who sat motionless, ears alert, watching the darkened streets with quiet focus. Emily turned to Ryan. "That was reckless." Ryan leaned back, letting his head hit the seat. "Yeah." Silence stretched between them. Rain tapped steadily against the roof. Emily swallowed. "We need to end this. For good." Ryan nodded, staring through the windshield at the distant skyline. Holloway had thrown everything at them, but they were still standing. Now it was their turn. The rain poured down in relentless sheets, soaking the city in a cold, merciless embrace. Thunder rumbled overhead as lightning split the sky, illuminating the abandoned warehouse by the river. Inside, dim industrial lights flickered, casting long shadows over rusted machinery and stacks of forgotten crates. Standing on the second floor, overlooking the open expanse below, Marcus Holloway watched the monitors, his expression unreadable. He knew Ryan Carter was alive. He knew that the man he had framed, the man he had sentenced to die, had come back. And he knew that this would only end one way. Either Ryan Carter would be buried tonight, or his entire empire would burn to the ground. Down below, Ryan, Detective Emily Grayson, and Shadow moved through the darkness, their breaths slow and controlled. The air inside was thick with oil, dust, and the scent of something far worse, blood. Ryan's grip on his gun tightened. His body was aching, sore from the fight, from the chase, from the hell Holloway had put him through. But none of it mattered now. This was the end. Emily's voice was a whisper in the dark. He's here. Ryan didn't need to be told. He could feel it. The weight of unfinished business pressing down on his chest. The quiet hum of death lingering in the air. Shadow tensed beside him, ears pinned forward, muscles coiled. The German shepherd's instincts had never been wrong before. Then, a voice rang out from above. Carter. Ryan stopped. He looked up. Holloway stood on the catwalk, a pistol in his hand, his face twisted in amusement. I have to admit, the deputy chief said, his voice echoing through the cavernous space. I underestimated you. Ryan stepped forward, gun raised. You regret it yet? Holloway chuckled. I don't do regrets. But you? Oh, you should have plenty. He raised his hand. Gunfire erupted. Ryan and Emily dove for cover behind a row of steel crates as bullets tore through the air, clanging against metal. Sparks flew. The roar of gunfire drowned out the storm outside. Shadow darted low, weaving between obstacles, a silent shadow in the chaos. Ryan peeked around the corner. 5 men. Holloway's personal squad. Emily reloaded. We're pinned. Ryan clenched his jaw. Not for long. He moved fast. Pivoting out of cover, he fired. 1 shot. 2. The first guard went down, clutching his shoulder, screaming. The second flinched, but Emily was faster. Her bullet hit true. A third charged, but Shadow moved first. The German shepherd leaped, his powerful jaws clamping down on the man's forearm. The guard screamed, his weapon clattering to the ground. Shadow twisted, dragging the man down with a brutal force. Ryan turned his focus to the catwalk. Holloway was running. He's trying to get to the roof, Emily shouted. Ryan didn't hesitate. He bolted. His boots pounded against the metal stairs as he chased Holloway upward. Rain lashed against his face as he pushed open the rooftop door. And there, in the storm, stood Holloway. The deputy chief was breathing heavily, his suit drenched, his gun still in his grip. But he wasn't running anymore. He turned slowly, a twisted smile creeping onto his face. You think this ends with me? Holloway called over the rain. You really think taking me down is going to fix anything? Ryan took a step forward, gun steady. I don't need to fix everything. I just need to end you. Holloway smirked. Then do it. He raised his gun. But before he could fire, Shadow struck. The German shepherd launched forward from the doorway, teeth bared, a growl ripping through the storm. He crashed into Holloway with full force. Holloway staggered, his grip loosening. His gun flew from his hands. Ryan seized the moment. 1 punch. Holloway's head snapped back. He stumbled, but Ryan didn't stop. Another punch. Blood sprayed from Holloway's nose as he fell to his knees, gasping, hands scrambling for purchase on the slick rooftop. Ryan loomed over him. This is for Daniel Cross. He swung again. Holloway collapsed onto his back, coughing, laughing, still laughing. You don't get it? Holloway rasped, spitting blood. I'm not the only one. The system doesn't change. Ryan stepped back, breathing hard. Then we burn it down. The sound of sirens filled the air. Emily appeared in the doorway, gun drawn. "It's over, Holloway." Police officers flooded the rooftop. They moved quickly, grabbing the fallen deputy chief, locking his wrists in iron cuffs. Holloway didn't resist. He just smiled. As they dragged him past, he leaned in close to Ryan. His voice was barely a whisper. "You'll never win." Ryan met his gaze, unflinching. "I already have." Holloway was shoved into the waiting car below, his smirk finally fading as the doors slammed shut. The rain kept falling, washing away the blood, the lies, the years of corruption. Ryan exhaled. Emily holstered her gun. "What now?" Ryan glanced down at Shadow, who was sitting patiently at his side, his tail flicking, his ears twitching against the storm. He smiled. "Now?" He scratched behind Shadow's ears. "Now we start over." And that's the end of Ryan Carter's story? Or is it? After everything he's been through, the betrayal, the chase, the fight for justice, was it all worth it? Did the right person finally pay the price? Or is there still more corruption hiding in the shadows, waiting to strike again? Now, I want to hear from you. What did you think of Ryan's journey? Did Shadow steal the show? Did the ending satisfy you? Or do you think there's more to uncover? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Or if you want to keep it simple, comment 2 if you love the story, and comment 7 if you think it could have been better. And if you believe in stories that keep you on the edge of your seat, in loyalty that never wavers, and in fighting for the truth no matter the cost, then make sure you're subscribed to Tapestry of Worlds. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss another gripping story like this one. And if this journey had you hooked from start to finish, share this video with someone who loves a good thriller. Because in a world full of secrets, sometimes the best stories are the ones they don't want you to hear.